What do you recommend for someone with eczema?
Um, Eczema has features of autoimmune, and it's often a precursor condition to autoimmune disease. So, for autoimmune patients, we recommend, first of all, changing to a whole foods plant based diet, getting rid of dairy products because of molecular mimicry and all kinds of other reasons, too. Not much justification for consuming dairy. Limiting high gluten foods because of molecular mimicry. Um, Taking a probiotic, which restores the gut microbiome, and that is the thermostat for the immune system. So, autoimmune is the misbehavior of the immune system, can't recognize self from non self. Um, Carefully looking into data on vaccines as a cause of autoimmunity. Some of the highest payouts from the vaccine court have been for autoimmune responses to vaccines. Looking at hydration, I mean, the typical things we talk about here, weight, people who carry excess weight, your fat cells produce inflammatory molecules like cytokines. And so the body exists in a constant state of inflammation, which is bad for everything. For most autoimmune diseases develop in women, so hormonal imbalances are usually a contributing factor, taking a look at that. So it's a multifaceted approach, but eczema is not a life-threatening condition. It can just lead to conditions that are life-threatening if you don't nip it in the bud.
Is there any data on the impact on disease of doing a 100% water fast?
Yes, actually. Dr. Alan Goldhammer is the founder of True North in Santa Rosa, California. I've sent hundreds of people out there, all with good results. And water only fasting, when done in a very confined, organized way where you're completely at rest, okay, and under the care of physicians. I'm a strong advocate for that. Do not try at home alone. Has been shown to have all kinds of positive effects. One of the things that Dr. Goldhammer has been doing recently is publishing articles on the effects of water fasting, and he's even with some cancer patients doing some long-term follow-up. So he's documented in case reports a couple of cases of remission of cancer due to water fasting. So the way I describe it to people in terms of its effect is it's like rebooting your computer. Sometimes your computer just gets to the place where you got to reboot it. It just won't function, right? You reboot it, and then it's fine. All the updates happen, and so when you stop digesting food and you just rest in a state of rest, a lot of things happen. And by the way, fasting has been used even in biblical times for both spiritual enlightenment and for health renewal. And one thing I tell people is that things that last for thousands of years generally have some merit. You notice bloodletting didn't last very long. We figured out pretty soon that didn't work. The Halsted mastectomy, that only went on for a few decades. We figured out that doesn't work. But when you see a practice that has gone on for thousands of years, that's usually a pretty good sign that there's some merit to it.
Should we add fats to our diet from avocados, olives, raw seeds, raw nuts, hemp oil, flax oil, olive oil?
Well, added fats, I don't want anybody to add fat to the diet. In other words, do you need some fat? Yes. And it's if you're eating a plant-based diet, you're going to take in some fat. People don't recognize chickpeas contain fat. Soy contains some fat. So you're not going to eat a fat-free diet no matter what you eat, and nobody is proposing that. Oils I talked about earlier, it's just such concentrated fat and calories, and with 2/3 of the country overweight or obese, I just can't fathom why people think that it's okay to eat oil. When it comes to nuts and avocados and that sort of thing, people overeat that stuff. And so what we've told people here for years is how about eating that when it is part of a recipe or something that you order in a restaurant. So there's a restaurant here in Columbus that a lot of us like, and they serve this. It's a dinner plate of kale salad. It's fabulous, and it has slices of avocado on top. I eat that. There's a restaurant near my lake house. They have these wraps that black beans and avocado. I eat that. What I don't do is go to the store and buy 4 avocados and bring them home and say, okay, what am I going to put this in, right? Because that leads to the, 10, 20, 30, 40 grams of fat at a time. The same thing with nuts. I never reach my hand in the bag and grab a handful of cashews, but I'll chop them up and sprinkle them on top of a recipe, for example, or use them in cooking, and that's fine to do. So we're not suggesting that people not eat this stuff. We're suggesting that people not look for ways to eat it all the time, because it usually leads to overeating it all the time.
What's wrong with eating fish? Everyone says it's healthy.
Well, I don't think there's anything wrong with eating fish. I think it should be wild caught if you're going to consume it. We've never taught a vegan diet here. It's tied up in that issue, okay? For the record, I'm a pretty well-known vegan. I like eating a vegan diet. I have a history of extremism. I took up running. First race I ran was a marathon. People said, did you ever think about starting with a 5K? Well, in my world, if you're going to run, you run. But I used to be a smoker. I smoked 4 packs of cigarettes a day. Right? So that's kind of my personality. But it would be very disingenuous of me to say that you have to be a vegan in order to regain or maintain your health, because the Blue Zones, which we talked about earlier, none of them are vegan. The Okinawans are not vegan. What they share is they eat a tiny amount of animal food. And depending upon where you live, that determines the type of animal food. So the Ethiopians eat goat. They don't eat goat in rural China. They don't eat it in Okinawa, right? So I don't think there's anything the matter with having 2 or 3 servings of animal food a week. If you choose to do it. Just make sure it's organic if it's a land animal, wild caught if it's fish, and avoiding dairy. Now, having said that, fish is not better than beef, all right? And chicken is not better than pork. Animal flesh is animal flesh. The key is to keep it at a minimum in the diet. And I have colleagues of mine, sometimes former colleagues actually at this point in time, who become apoplectic when I talk about that. But one of the reasons I think it's important to make this distinction, it's a little bit tangential to the fish question, is that a diet that people stick with for a few weeks and quit doesn't really help anything. A diet that people adopt and stick with for 10 years becomes meaningful in terms of outcomes. And so we're very interested here in the long term. Our people become members and they stay members for some of them 20 some years now. So we want to see that long-term adherence to something, not just a few weeks and then we never see them again.
Are all fruits healthy? Are some too sugary due to hybridization and not being native to our area, such as pineapples, mangoes, seedless grapes, bananas?
Okay, so that's a complex question you just asked. And the first thing is hybridization, which people perceive as a bad thing. And it's actually the reason why you and I have food right now. Hybridization is where you grow varieties of certain types of foods by crossing them with the same type of food. So if I wanted to make a white sweet potato that was long, that comes from hybridization. And there's some benefits to doing it. A lot of people are not aware that the reason why why 1 million Irish perished in the potato famine is because they were only growing one kind of potato in Ireland. Had they hybridized potatoes, there wouldn't have been any starvation, right? So hybridization is a good thing, not a bad thing, all right? And people confuse it with genetically modified foods, not the same thing. There aren't any fruits that I discourage people from eating. There aren't any vegetables that I discourage people from eating. What I encourage people to do is to eat the foods that they like within the pattern of eating. So if somebody says, I like pineapple, I'm a person who does, I eat pineapple. Some people say, pineapple's too much work. You got to cut the, okay, then don't eat any pineapple. All right. If you like blackberries, eat them. If you don't. But this whole idea that there are certain fruits you have to eat and certain ones that you stay away from. And if you're going to eat an apple, it needs to be a green apple. I don't like green apples. Okay. And to this point, I think it's an important point to make. I remember early in my career talking with a client. I said, well, how's it going? You're trying to eat better and all that. She says, well, it's fine. I said, well, you don't sound very excited about it. She goes, well, I'm eating green apples and kale. I said, well, it doesn't sound like you like those foods. I don't. Well, why are you eating them? Well, they say green apples are better for you, and they've got those charts say kale is the most densely nutritious vegetable. Listen, that's not going to last very long, okay? Again, going back to what I said, it's so important to get this long-term compliance. So eat the vegetables you like. Eat anything leafy green, all right? And people say, well, what about iceberg lettuce? I'll tell you what, it's better than cheeseburgers for lunch. And if that's our starting point, I'll take it. Get people eating what they want and stop trying to force them to conform to certain fruits, certain vegetables. You got to eat a sweet potato. If you eat a white potato, you must have a death wish. I mean, this is just all nonsense, and we got to get away from this kind of thing.
What do you recommend for someone who has gastrointestinal pain who is already plant-based?
Well, you have to get to the root of it, and plant-based doesn't solve everything. All right. I think that's another form of reductionism. No matter what's wrong with you, adopt this diet and it will fix everything. And if it doesn't fix it, you must not be compliant. It's just not, that's another form of nonsense. People become healthy when they look at all of the contributing factors to their health. All right. So if you've had 25 rounds of antibiotics for recurrent urinary tract infections, you're probably going to have gastrointestinal distress no matter what you eat. And if you don't take some probiotics, it probably isn't going to go away. All right. You can eat vegetables till the end of your days and it's not going to fix it. If you are eating a high fat, plant-based diet, you're probably going to still have gallbladder issues. Okay. Even if you're not eating animals anymore. So you have to identify the cause. And I strongly resist this idea that plant-based eating by itself solves problems. I mean, I would say 30% of the people coming in here as members, and our dietitians would tell you this, they're already eating a plant-based diet, some of them vegan, and they're still coming in here. Why? Okay, because it didn't solve everything for them.
What is gluten? Who should avoid it? If you keep eating it, will you end up with celiac disease? Should we avoid wheat, oats, and barley since they have gluten? Are all other whole grains like quinoa, millet, amaranth, teff, buckwheat, and wild rice safe for a celiac patient?
Okay, so first of all, eating gluten is a protein in certain grain products, grain foods. Eating gluten doesn't cause celiac disease. Celiac disease is a genetically predisposed condition that develops in people who are genetically predisposed. And the solution to it is eating a medically gluten-free diet, which means avoiding all grains that contain gluten and also paying attention to even condiments. So you'll see people who have celiac disease reading labels on soy sauce, for example, to make sure that, that they're not even eating trace amounts of gluten, because while their symptoms are not the same, the response is similar to the person who has a severe peanut allergy, that even exposure to peanut dust could cause the anaphylactic shock. So the celiac patient has to stay away from all gluten. There are some people, autoimmune patients should stay away from high gluten foods because of molecular mimicry. The gluten proteins, the amino acids that make up gluten look like the amino acids that make up some tissues of the body. And we don't want autoimmune patients to develop other autoimmune diseases. And it's a complicated mechanism there. But there's no reason for the general population to avoid gluten. And the recommendation to do it is just ludicrous. It's issued by people who don't have a clue.
Of all the people you have advised over the last 10 years who followed your advice, what were the results? What percent got to their optimal blood sugar, blood pressure, and weight? What percent reversed major health issues? And what percent didn't get the expected results?
Well, of all the people, I've advised so many people directly and indirectly. I mean, hundreds of thousands. I've sold, a million books, right? So, and who knows how many people I've reached through lectures. I don't think anybody can quantify that, okay? It would require record keeping that a company like this can't actually engage in. What I can tell you is this. Typically, what happens is that people who adopt a health promoting diet and pay attention to the other things that they need to pay attention to, all right? Going back to the cancer patient, a cancer patient who eats perfectly and signs up for chemotherapy that kills people isn't going to turn out so well. So the totality of the approach to health, I think, is very important. I think people have meaningful improvements in their health. And the definition of meaningful improvement depends upon the situation. All right. So, there's this push when people start looking at this. Well, if I have type 2 diabetes and high blood pressure and all these things wrong with me, is it all going to go away? Well, if you're making a promise that everything's going to go away, I think that's incredibly misleading. What you can tell people is it's going to get better. So I teach by analogy. Let me give you an example. Let's say that you come into my office right now, and I'm sitting here and I have this huge gash on my arm. I mean, huge, okay? And it is bleeding and I'm picking at it. We're having a conversation and I tell you that, this thing is bleeding and it hurts. And at some point in time you say, listen, I don't want to meddle, but I'm pretty sure if you stop picking at that sore, it'll make things better. And you'd be right about that, right? First thing you do is stop picking at the sore. And it will get better. From a common sense standpoint, we know that's the first step. Okay, so now I start asking you questions. You seem to know something about this. So how fast will it go away? Well, I don't know. Do you think it'll stop bleeding while you're here? I don't know. Do you think it'll leave a scar? Well, I don't know. Do you think I need stitches? Maybe I'm going to have to do that. Well, I don't know. Do you think it's going to get infected? I don't know. But here's what I know. The first step in solving this problem is you got to stop picking at it. Okay. And then we'll see about all the rest of this, because Pam, I suspect that when I came in here, that sore had been there for a real long time. That probably didn't happen 5 minutes before I walked in the door. And it looks like it's pretty deep and pretty bad. All right. So we're going to stop picking at it and then we're just going to see what happens. So I don't think you can promise cure. I think you can promise that it will get better. And then, of course, you have all kinds of varying levels of compliance on diet and lifestyle change. And I think part of our job is just to continue to engage with people to try to help them stay on track, and to be compassionate about the way that we do it. And so this harsh, everybody becomes vegan, and if you're not doing it right, you're a bad person, you have a death to it. I like to get all of that out of the equation, and get all that judgment out of there. It's interesting. People will come in here sometimes, and I think it goes to the bad relationship that people have with doctors and health coaches and health advisors. They'll say, you're going to be so mad at me. And I'll say, what do you think I'm going to be mad at you about? Well, we talked about my joining a gym and I told you I was going to do it. I haven't done it. I tell, oh, thank God. They go, what do you mean? Well, now, if you slashed my tires or you hurt my cat, I would be very mad at you. But you didn't renew your gym membership. Whew, thank goodness, that's fixable. And you can see the palpable relief, because people are used to this judgmental, harsh, you must have a character defect if you're not doing it, So I think that all in all, our job is to help people start down a path of getting healthier. And it's going to take them where it takes them. And there's a great deal of variability in all of this. And one last thing I'll say about this, not to run on and on about it, but the documentaries in this field have been remarkably effective in motivating people. We don't read books in our society as much as we watch visual video, The one problem with them is that to make a 90-minute documentary, you're going to pick some perfect patients. And they start the film and they have doctors who take them off their meds and they're really supportive. And their families are all on board. And they have simple problems like type 2 diabetes or high blood pressure or weight, and it goes away. And at 90 minutes or 96 minutes, everybody's living happily ever after and walking on the sand by the water with their spouse, right? In real life, it's a whole lot messier than that. So I think we have to be really careful about what we promise to people.